And some horses are wired to do it different ways, mentally and physically. When we go shopping somewhere, I don't get on the horse until later usually. I put them in front of people they don't know in a barn they're unfamiliar with on a horse they don't know, and tell them to go knock out a pattern or something, start going. And if it's a hit within 3 minutes, I'm like, okay, let's do it. Assuming it's the right quality of horse and everything else is fit.
Bring them in on the rail at a jog, please. On the rail at a jog.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of On the Rail podcast. Today, we will be talking a majority about horsemanship, which I know some of you are super pumped up about. So without further ado, I'll let our guest introduce himself, what he does, where he's from, and just what he's doing in the industry right now.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Kelly McDowell, and my wife Marnie and I own and operate McDowell Quarter Horses in Franktown, Colorado. We do a variety of all-around horses. I always say if it doesn't have a sliding stop, a cow, or a jump, we probably do it. And we like it that way. We like horses that can do lots of different events, and amateurs, youth, selects, open horses. We try to do it all and try to do it all well.
Have you always been an all-around guy, or did you do futurity horses back in the day or anything, or just been hardcore all-around from the get-go?
When I was in high school, I just had a horse that was just kind of a horse, and he happened, I think, to have a good rhythm and was a quarter horse. So I would go to like one show a year where I showed him in the Western Pleasure, and I always say that horse ruined me for everything else I wanted to do in my life. So when I got out of college and wanted to become a trainer, I really wanted to be a reining trainer, and worked for a place, and everything I rode went slow and put their heads down, and they just kind of were easy pleasure horses. And then the next place I went to, same thing, and didn't take me a couple of years to figure out I was not meant to go fast and do sliding stops. I was meant to go slow and do other things. So I worked for a lady here in Colorado where she raised quite a few babies, and I would try to do the futurity stuff with them, and had a few good ones, but I found it really difficult when I went into business for myself in this part of the country, to be a successful Western pleasure person and have enough horses to make a living. So watch some of my friends enjoying purchasing all-around horses, good pleasure horses, and then turning them into all-around horses, and enjoying the success and the fruits of those labors, and decided I would join them.
So the majority of horses you get into your program now, or I assume they're probably past their initial baby years, they all have their kind of foundation started, and then you take them and make them all around horses, or where do you usually get those?
Kind of depends on the person. I have one now that was raised by a customer out of a mare that we showed years ago in the all around, and it appears to be a very nice mover, and I'm very excited about it. Spent all of last year at my buddy Gil Gallions, and came back here. I couldn't ride much at all last year. I had some things going on, but so it lived there for a year. It was sent down there for a month or two and being there for a year. It's back here now, and I'm feeling like it's probably going to do some 3-year-old stuff. It's a very good loper and a very good jogger. We also have a customer or two who like to go out and buy young Western pleasure horses and then teach them to do the all-around events and then sell them. And, that's sort of how they afford to do the showing. Buy horses and get them trained up and make them valuable and resell them. And that's a great way to do it. And then I have another group that they want to buy it on Saturday and put it on the trailer on Sunday and off we go to the horse show and do 6 events or whatever. So a little bit of everything going on here. I like a variety of horses in my barn. It keeps me entertained, and I don't like to just have a bunch of old ones, and I don't like to have a bunch of young ones. I like to have a little bit of everything and kind of break the monotony of it for me a little bit.
So with your wife partnered with you, or you guys are combined, do you guys kind of like split out who does what events on these all-arounders, or do you kind of like take over one horse and she'll do another type of thing?
She's way smarter than me. She's a physical therapist and has been forever. Shows in the select amateur and has her own horse, and she does not train any horses at all. She helps with the important stuff around here. She's a great help to me. Like I told you guys before, I'm terrible with numbers, and she's really good with them. So she does the billing and all of that sort of thing.
That's a resounding thing that all trainers seem to say. They're not good with the numbers part of the business.
You need somebody to keep the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all about walking out of the house in the morning and getting on a horse and walking back in the house and turning on the TV. There's not a lot of computer time for me.
So what qualities do you look for in a standout horsemanship horse? I know horsemanship's kind of going to be our topic of the day, so we'll dive into that.
I have in my head a horse that I really like the feel of and that I get along with. And that horse is slow-minded but fast-footed. And so what I mean by that is like they've done the pleasure. Not like one of our very best ones was sort of a terrorist in the pleasure class. It just wasn't enough action for him. And he really excelled in his life when he got to learn all the other events. That's what he was waiting on in his life. And he'll go do the pleasure now. He's fantastic and enjoys it. But he really didn't want to just go around in circles. And so for me, the group that I have, I'm very fortunate to have a bunch of really nice horses right now. And I consider them highly intelligent, highly athletic, very kind. They want to do good. They don't spend their days trying to get out of whatever you're teaching them for the most part. You know, they all have their days where they're just like people. They have their days where they want to do it. They have days when they don't want to do it. But for the most part, they are willing participants and makes our show lives very much fun. Incredible athletes is what I would say. They're incredible athletes and great minds to work with. And my job gets to be, I always say in the old days, it was us against them. If I could make them do it, then they probably would be pretty good. But a lot of them, you couldn't make them do it, and it was a battle. And now it's about whether or not I can teach them to do it, because they all want to do it. You know, the ones that I get at this point in my career, they all want to do it. They all can do it. And so it's my job to break down the different methods of continuing their education and teaching them to do the job that we need them to do.
It's like wisdom with a lot of years of experience. Do you have any like personal preference between mares and geldings, or?
Oh yeah, I'm a gelding person for sure.
You're not sadistic.
No, I have one mare here that I really, really like. Her name's Miss Daisy is Lazy, and she's fantastic. And, you know, I've had a few over the years that I liked, but not very many. It's few and far between that you can drag those mares out of the stalls 6, 8, 10 times a day. And, you know, after about the 4th one, they're not like, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to be a willing participant this time. Where the geldings are just like, all right, whatever, let's go.
That's very accurate, I feel like.
I think the geldings are happy to get out and not have to stand in their stall, and the mares just kind of want to be left alone most of the time.
So on that note, when you're looking at what impresses you about the horsemanship horses, what is it when they're standing at the cone that you first will take notice of when somebody's starting a pattern?
I like a big, fat, beautiful horse. Marnie's always telling me, why do you want the horses so fat? And I'm like, you know, when I'm just sitting in there judging and a big, fat, pretty horse walks up to the cone, there's only 2 reasons why that horse is big and fat and shiny. The first reason is it's rotten and nobody wants to ride it. And the second reason is it's awesome and nobody has to ride it. And so they get fat, they get shiny, and you can tell that in 10 steps of every horse that it's either brilliant or it's terrible. And you can tell by their expression that they want to do their job. All those things go into play. They sort of look like they've been through the ringer when they come up to that cone. Then probably they're a lot of hard work, and that's going to show up in their pattern.
In terms of the rider, what impresses you or makes you take notice of a rider before the pattern even starts?
Before the pattern starts, probably nothing really. I mean, I like to see somebody who's dressed currently, has their hat shaped by somebody who knew what they were doing. And that's really probably all my brain's going to take in. I'm not big on shiny outfits or plain outfits. I don't really care. We do both here. I think it's all about if you get out there and look like you've been practicing, then I'm probably going to pay attention. If you get out there and look like you haven't been to the barn in 3 weeks, then you're probably going to lose me pretty quick as far as, running your score up there very high. I think horsemanship's, if you break it down, horsemanship's pretty simple. You got to sit in the middle. You got to have a good connection between you and your horse and be able to break down a pattern. That's pretty much it.
Do you feel as a judge, but also being a trainer that specializes in these all-around events, that you can identify weaknesses very quickly compared to maybe some other judges that maybe aren't as specialized in the pattern events? I mean, like, can you poke holes in somebody? I know that's not necessarily your goal by any means, but I'm sure you can see weak areas pretty quick.
I am a big picture kind of a person. I think as judges, we all have something in the horsemanship that we focus in on. Some people really focus on the feet. Some people focus on the shoulders. Some people focus on, is their head tipped to the right or the left? I'm sort of a big picture. I don't really try to break it down. It sort of breaks itself down for me. If there starts to be holes in the pattern or holes in the communication or holes in the timing, then my brain and my eyes are going to go looking for what that hole is. So what's wrong with their leg that's causing that? Do they not have enough connection with that horse's mouth or face, or enough connection with their sides? What's causing that problem in the timing? I'm not sitting there looking at somebody's feet, or if they go do a pattern and it's smooth and it's flawless and the rider's not bouncing all over, then I'm going to enjoy that. I'm not going to try to break it down. I'm just going to be like, wow, that was really good, and I'm going to give it a good score. Where if it starts to fall apart a little bit, then I'm going to be trying to figure out in my head what's wrong. As a teacher, I would say, as a coach and a teacher, that's sort of what happens when I watch my students. If it looks great, then I'll be like, hey, that looks great, good job. If not, then I'm going to be trying to figure out a way. When I was young, I was telling my daughter this the other day, I didn't have any formal coaching. I had one lesson. A neighbor lady asked me, I had a pony I was getting ready to go to the county fair with, and she said, do you know your leads? And I was like, I don't know what leads are. So she taught me my leads that day. And that was really the only lesson I had as a kid. The rest of the time, I just rode my horse and figured stuff out. And so that, I feel like that sort of rears its head when I'm giving lessons or coaching. I don't always look at something and see what it is, but I can figure it out. If you'll be patient with me and let me run through some drills with you and do some different things and move some body parts around, then I'll figure out what it is, but it might take me a little longer than somebody who really had lessons in it or had a coach that, broke things down for them when they were young.
Before we move on from this topic, just real quick, since you do coach Natalia Devincenti, right, that has now the last 2 years defending amateur horsemanship champion at the AQHA World Show. So obviously you're her coach or her trainer, so maybe a little bit biased, but she's very well accomplished. But what makes her such a great horsemanship rider?
A lot of things. I would say coach, stepdad, all kinds of things with Natalia. We're more like family at this point. She's been here riding. Her and her mother have been here for a very long time, and we're very much like family, I would say. I would say more than anything, Natalia's personality helps her in the horsemanship. She is fearless and she's very physically strong naturally. It's not like she works out a lot or does anything to do that. She has a God-given talent of strength when she's on a horse. She's just a strong person and able to sit still even when they're bouncing around. I was watching her pattern from the World Show this year, and there was a long extended lope, and she was just flying, and I was like, man, I don't know how she can sit on that and sit so still. I mean, nobody can do that. And there she goes flying down the arena. And I mean, it's just something she can do. She works really, really hard at it. I can't remember. I ask them all the time how long they've been here. It's been like 10 years. So she was a little kid when she first started coming here and had not ridden Western. She didn't even know how to ride one-handed when she came here. She had been doing hunters. And so some of that strength comes from that. But she really had to work hard to learn how to do the Western stuff. And we were fortunate and found her a nice horse. When she started being able to use her legs a little bit, then that horse was not a player anymore. And we had to find her another horse. And we were fortunate to find a really great horse, and Chex is the choice for her. And her and her mom, they live in Pueblo, which is about an hour and a half away, maybe a little more on some days, depending on traffic. And they would make that trip at least 3 times a week, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. I mean, they were on the road nonstop coming up here to ride. And there's just no substitute for that. When you're trying to get that strength and that timing and that connection with your horse, there's no substitute for being on a horse and having somebody sitting there watching you, helping you with the different maneuvers and that sort of thing.
Has she always had that amount of confidence, or has that confidence came as she's been so successful? Or a little bit of both? Always had that
Always.
much?
As a rider, she might say something different, but to me, she's never been afraid to go in there and show. I think a lot of people in our world are driven by their thoughts about making mistakes or letting someone down or whatever else. And I tell you, she just doesn't subscribe to that. She's in there and going for it.
Sounds like we need to talk to her so she can give us all her secrets. Although I'm sure it's just probably part of her that's God-given, and a lot of us don't get that part given to us.
Yeah, I think confidence has a lot to do with how you grew up with your parents and your family. And she and I are both Scorpions, and so we battle back and forth. Brother and sister, most of the time, she comes in and razzes me for about 10 minutes, and then I razz her for 10 minutes. And, it's just always been like that. We're both always battling for control of the situations. And, somehow or another, we always find our way to the right place and really enjoy, at least I do, enjoy having each other around all the time.
So kind of on that note, with us talking about her strength in riding and the practice she puts in, is there anything like specific that you integrate into your coaching sessions, if I could talk today, or like lesson program that you do with your riders? Is there anything that others should think about incorporating into their rides?
I have a program that works well for me. There's a few other people around that do it like we do. Basically, I'm the catch rider, or my great assistant Annette is the catch rider. We ride them throughout the week, but when I go to buy a horse for someone, it needs to be for that person. It needs to, when they get on it, and like the people that are buying ones that want to go to the horse show the next day, it needs to speak their language. I feel like riders, non-pro riders in general, ride how they ride. They've rode like that when they were kids, and they're going to ride like that all their life. So when you walk through that gate for the first time on a new horse and those nerves hit you, those nerves are never going to change. You're always going to ride that horse that same way, and that horse needs to be wired to handle that. So we have a lot of success right off the bat with some of our horses that we go and buy, because we search the world for them, and I won't let them buy one until I'm like, all right, we can throw that one in the trailer and it speaks your language. I myself can adapt to whatever. I ride all different types of horses. Some people are squeezers when they get nervous. Some people, are grabbers. Some people go limp when they're nervous. And those horses have to just deal with it. And some horses are wired to do it different ways, mentally and physically. When we go shopping somewhere, I don't get on the horse until later usually. I put them in front of people they don't know in a barn they're unfamiliar with, on a horse they don't know, and tell them to go knock out a pattern or something, start going. And if it's a hit within 3 minutes, I'm like, okay, let's do it. assuming it's the right quality of horse and everything else is fit, that's sort of where we find our initial success. And then I think that as those people get those horses that speak their language and they enjoy spending time with those horses, they come and they ride more. And so when we show up at a horse show, those people are riding their horses. They don't necessarily lunge them, but they're the ones doing the work most of the time. So my select riders are a great example. They're out there riding their own horses. They're not watching me ride it. They're not out there most of the time with me telling them what to do. They're out there figuring it out for themselves. If they have a problem, they come get me. And then when it's my turn to show, I just hop on and go show. And I know the horses well enough, I can tell the different things that they're doing. So the horse shows that we don't like to attend as McDowell quarter horses are the ones that are open horses for the first 2 or 3 days, and then the youth and amateur horses for the second 2 or 3 days. Because none of my horses are ready because their riders aren't there. You know what I mean? At a regular horse show, those people are there all the time riding their horses, getting them ready for me to show and for them to show. And at those horse shows, Danette and I are the only ones there, and they're always crazy when we're the only ones riding them. We just can't get to all of them. We can't get through 12 or 15 horses ourselves. And so, when the kids and the amateurs and the selects start showing up at the horse show, then the horses all get good again. I feel like that's a big difference from me to everyone else. It's pretty rare if you come to the World Show and watch the warm-up pen. It's pretty rare to see me on a horse when the amateur horsemanship or the select horsemanship is going. I feel like those people need to know what to fix on that horse, and I need to be there to help them when they're having trouble, not be on top of the horse fixing it.
From an outsider perspective, that's a fascinating approach, and I love it. I mean, it makes so much sense to me.
I feel like it would build more confidence for your clients too, like them knowing what to expect from their horse just because they're the ones warming it up, getting it ready. That's interesting. I like that.
It's pretty rare, I think. So Natalia's a great example. It's almost never when she comes out and goes, wow, that was really good. It's always like, man, he was doing this and he was doing that. And, to you and me, it looks like it was just smooth and flawless, but it's nonstop fixing problems, right? You have to be horseman enough to see the problem coming, prepare for that problem, fix that problem, and be on to the next maneuver with nobody else knowing that it happened. And there's no way you can do that, in my opinion, with somebody else riding your horse. There are programs where that works really great, and I applaud them, and they do a great job as well. But I think great coaching, great horses, and great people can do amazing things, no matter what your approach is to it. I spend a lot of time sitting in my chair. I'm not good at riding horses and giving lessons. I try, especially, as I get older, when people show up to ride, unless I've really got a project or something going on that I need to pay attention to, I get off and go sit in my chair and watch them ride. And some days they need me to do something, and some days I just sit there and watch them. Just kind of depends on, where they're at in their process or progress or lack of progress with their horse, whatever they're working on.
So from a judge's perspective, what influences your F&E score and what can be done to improve it? And for most people probably know what that is, but it's form and effectiveness score on the score sheets.
I think that there's lots of ways people can use the F&E. So my general way of using it is everybody gets a 3. If you really impress me, you get a 4. And if it looks like you haven't been to the barn in a month, you're getting a 2. I almost never give a 1, and I almost never give a 5. At the Congress or the World Show, the finals of the horsemanship, they're all 5s. I mean, I'm just going to give them a 5 right off the bat. You earn that when you get to that point. If I'm judging in Timbuktu, everybody's getting a 3, unless you're really impressed me. I would much rather have the pattern be my way of finding a score for that person than I feel like that form and the F&Es probably used as a tiebreaker sometimes, or, different people use it for different things. And I'm sure they're very effective with it. I try to not use it myself. I try to let the pattern speak for itself.
When you say somebody impresses you, is that just your overall holistic opinion of their pattern and their presentation and everything as a whole, more so than any one thing? Or what When you say impresses you, I guess, what does that mean to you?
Good timing, a good connection with their horse, strength. I like to see 3 points of connection: the mouth, their legs, and their seat. I don't like people riding around with loose reins in the horsemanship. The rule book says light contact. I think that's not very vague, but somewhat vague. And so my riders tend to try to ride with a lot of contact with their face. I feel like that helps your balance and your control of your horse, but that doesn't work for everyone. And I understand that. So I try to let the rider and the horse together, and how they get through the pattern tell me whether I'm impressed or not impressed. I try myself to leave style. They always say when you're judging the reiners, leave the style out of it. They're either good at it or they're not good at it. Doesn't matter if their head's up, their head's down, whatever. And I try to do that a little bit with the horsemanship. I don't really care, within reason, where their offhand is at. It's got to be in that ballpark. But some riders ride with it real high. Some riders ride with it down a little bit. I try not to let that be part of my thinking or my judging, as long as it all fits together. I try not to worry about if their reins are a little longer than I would be coaching that person to ride with, but yet they're still within light contact is the rule. If they're still within that boundary to me, then I'm not going to try not to let that affect my decision making. I'm going to look for the best rider and horse combination and work my way through the pattern that way and try to leave all the rest of that out of it.
So on that note, do you have like the biggest pet peeve to you when it comes to people showing in the pen? Is there anything that like just grinds your gears a little bit?
Long reins in the horsemanship. That's easily my biggest pet peeve is people that come in and ride with a loose rein in the horsemanship. And I'm talking like I just said, I'm talking Western pleasure-ish kind of rein, not just light contact, but
a noticeable drape in the reins.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not going to impress me. How's that? I really like when a rider can hop on and grab a hold of their horse and not have to worry about pulling on it or not have to worry about letting go. They have such a good connection with that horse's mouth and the rest of its body that horse can actually help them balance or strengthen their upper body, hold them still. So like if you, again, back to Natalia, if you watch her do that fast run, she's got a hold of that big boy, his mouth, and that's what's holding her still, that and her strong legs. It's hard not to rock back and forth if you don't have a hold of something with your upper body. We sort of approach our contact with their mouth as at some point in time, we're going to have to be there to help. It's not about having a hard hold on their mouth or a strong hold on their mouth to intimidate them. It is to have a connection that doesn't need to have space taken before you make contact. Okay, so if I've got 6 inches of rein out there and I need to make an adjustment, I got to take up 6 inches or do it with my feet. Some people can do it with their feet. We try to just do it with our hand and our feet combination. So I don't know how I got off on that track, but that would be my pet peeve is long reins.
Yeah, we had a listener question, and rather than try and paraphrase this, I'm just going to read it so everybody hears it. It's a good question. This person asked, I often see a standout rider on an average horse and okay riders on a super broke horse. It seems the broke horse will win hands down most of the time, even with a rider with very average riding performance, like hands and legs that aren't steady or a seat that's not sticky, etc. A broke horse is easier to ride and show, but the class is horsemanship. I feel we've moved away from that very aspect a bit. Things have definitely evolved over the decades, but I remember when a great rider would usually win. I guess they were wanting your opinions on that.
That's a great question. I love that one. I am all about a horse and rider combination. It is not all about the rider and it is not all about the horse. It has to be a team working together to finish a pattern correctly. And for me, on a green broke horse, the chances of that happening are pretty slim, right? It's going to take some time before that good rider gets competitive on that green horse. And I also think since we've gone to a scoring system, it's really scored on the maneuvers. And so, if you have a really great rider on a horse that can't turn around, and there's 3 turnarounds in this pattern, they're kind of out of it from the beginning. It'd be like judging a trail horse that can't go over a pole. You know what I mean? A Western horsemanship horse has to turn around. It has to change leads, whether that's simple or flying. It has to go fast. It has to go slow. It has to let you touch its sides. It has to let you hold its mouth somewhat. All of that goes into the judging of a horsemanship class. There are some really great riders that I am friends with, and I judge and show with them all the time that do show, they have project horses that they bring up through the ranks, and they're very successful on them. But they're not very successful until those horses are trained up enough that they can actually do the maneuvers. If they can't do the maneuvers, then you're going to suffer a little bit in your score, and that's going to show in your placings.
How much does the quality of movement of a horse play into horsemanship these days? Even at the highest level, is it pretty necessary to have at least a decent moving horse, or do you still see some that are, what you would consider below average movers?
I think we see all versions. I can think of one that won a bunch of stuff on not so great of a mover, but that was 5-6 years ago. I think a good moving horse is easier to ride generally than one that's not. But that doesn't make the not great mover horse a bad horse. I think if it's broken trained and can do the maneuvers and is a compliant partner, then great things can be done.
I have a off the wall type of question, but it goes with kind of Jenna's question on the movement. But do you think size matters when it comes to the horse? Like, I know some hunt seaters can cross over, but usually, they're maxing out at 16-1. Do you ever see any of the bigger hunt seat horses try to cross over into horsemanship? And do you see them being successful at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think there's one right now that I can think of that is, I want to say she was reserve world champion maybe at the Amateur World Show this year. That is also a fantastic hunt seat horse and a really tall Western rider. So I think the big horses definitely can do it. The hunt seat horses these days are a little tighter strided than the old days, and that's helpful. If I'm buying a horse that's like 16-2, then it better be kind of tight strided, because it's going to be hard to be athletic and maneuver through the trail and the Western riding and the horsemanship, all the things we do, if it's got a great big stride to it. But I also feel like that's sort of what the hunter and saddle horses are doing these days. They're a little more upright and a little more athletic, and they're not cantering along with a 10-foot stride. They're in there with a little bit bigger than the trail horses, maybe at 6, 7, 8 feet stride. So I think that being handy is a big part of horsemanship. It doesn't matter if they're tall or small or whatever. We've got small horses that aren't very handy sometimes, and they just don't work out to be the best horsemanship horses in the world. They got to be a little quick off your foot and quick off your neck rein, and I think that helps in the different maneuvers for the horsemanship.
When you're horse shopping, do you consider the size of the horse with the size of the rider as far as the overall picture goes for the pattern classes, or is it more about the match and between horse and rider as far as like communication? I'm
really bad about that. I often look out at my customers and I'm like, why did you get that person such a small horse? Why did you buy that great big old thing? I really look at how that horse gets along with the person. If I'm picking a broke horse for somebody who just wants to hop in the trailer and go show, I just see how they get along when they ride. My son Clay, he was a fantastic rider and won the youth world in the horsemanship years ago. And he's like 6'2", and his horse was like 15 hands. I mean, it was like a big kid riding a little pony. I mean, nobody cared about that. He was super fast and could manage that thing around there. And he was successful with that. My daughter, she's little tiny, and for whatever reason, we couldn't find her anything through her youth career but giants. So she had to ride giant horses through the horsemanship. So we just really, I think, I don't pay too much attention unless the customer really has a specific need, if they want to do the hunter runner saddle or the eck, then yeah, we're going to look for that's going to be in the criteria.
I feel like we get told kind of these, not told by anybody specifically, but we put these like self-imposed standards of like, well, it has to be this way and it has to be that way. Like if you're going to do this class at the highest level, but maybe a lot of that is self-imposed and not entirely accurate sometimes.
I think a lot of people think that way. I get calls all the time and they'll say, I've got a horse that's, let's say 15-2, and they'll say, oh, it's not tall enough for my rider. I'm like, you got a kid that's 6'2", been showing him for 5 years. How tall is your kid? So, I think a lot of people think of that or put more emphasis on that than I do. I just, probably a flaw in me, not them. I just don't pay much attention to that. Like I said before, I am more of I deal more in generalities and the picture of the entire pattern more than, what they look like as a team sitting at the cone. I want to see what they can do together.
So in terms of eck, do you need a bigger horse for stride length, or just because it's more of the hunter stuff and bigger horses, bigger everything?
I think at the weekend horse shows you can get by on a smaller horse. I feel like there's a limited supply of good equitation, or not good, but great equitation riders in the quarter horse industry. Is equitation on the flat, and you can zip in there and get you a prize on a smaller horse at the weekend horse shows. But when you get to the various world shows, unless you're just a knockout rider, I think you better have a horse that fits into the crowd. A little bigger horse. You don't want to stand out because your horse is tiny.
Doesn't look the part.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's really hard to look pretty posting a horse with a little tiny legs and short stride, right? You're just posting at 90 miles an hour. So it's a hard thing to do and look pretty at it. It's been done, and I'm not saying it can't be, but I think your chances are better if you get a little bigger horse.
Historically, it does seem the great eck riders come more from the hunter jumper world than they come exclusively from just our quarter paint type world. A lot of those like kids in the hunter jumper world just are incredible youth riders.
I think our kids are really great with the horse control. And I think those, like we talked about with Natalia, the hunter riders are really good at, they're real strong, a lot of them. And if you can get one of those that can do both worlds, you've got a really good rider. It's hard for them to come out of one and go to the other, I think, but there's quite a few of them now that are doing it and doing a really great job. Takes a special horse, I think, for those kids that come out of the hunter world and start to do the Western and start to, most of our controls are in our feet. And I think that's a really hard thing for the hunter kids to learn to do it. So it takes a couple different horses usually. And, the first horse has to be, how it worked out with Natalia. The first horse was totally controlled by its face, and it did not want you touching its sides. And so that worked great for her because she didn't know how to use her feet. She just sort of hung on and, was real strong. It wasn't like she was riding with her feet stuck out, but she just didn't use them to communicate much. And it was either go or go faster. And that's what all the extent of it. And then once she started using her feet, it was not pleased with it. And so we went and found a horse that knew how to use those buttons so she could work on those some more.
We had one other comment from a listener. Said at the International Judges Seminar last year, Robin Frid talked about this. He pointed out that riders who had to ride and think throughout their patterns and those who were less active. He definitely recommended giving credit to those with a higher level of difficulty. I would also like to ask if they see that trend being recommended by the associations. So I'm not exactly sure what they're saying, but I guess it's if you see somebody that you think is thinking through a pattern more so than
just sitting there, maybe.
It probably goes with the last question where they're on a horse that just point and shoot, or they're on a horse that's a little greener and they're having to think their way through the pattern a little bit and manage a horse. Those good old horsemanship horses, they know what you're going to do because you practiced it 3 hours ago. They know what maneuvers they've got a list of things that they know. When you say, whoa, they're either going to turn right, turn left, back up, lope off, and they're going to be ready for it. Where younger, greener horse is not going to be ready for that. And you've got to do all the preparation yourself. And so for me, that's when you sent me that question, that's what I thought. Robin's a smart guy and a good friend, and I think he's right. I mean, if that horse is doing the maneuvers properly and the rider is holding their position properly and able to manipulate that greener horse or harder horse even through the pattern than somebody on a more broke horse, then yeah, for sure, they're getting all the credit. I think that's a really hard thing to do, is get through a pattern smoothly on a horse that doesn't necessarily know what it's doing or want to do what you're telling it to.
Was it at this year's AQHA World Show that they did a green pattern stakes class? Is that
They
show
did,
they did?
yes.
Are you a fan of that?
Absolutely. My great friend Renee Howes won that this year. I was so proud of her. Her and Doug Holes really have a very nice horse, and I thought it was a great class. NSBA had it a couple of years ago. They've had some green pattern classes, and I was thrilled to see AQHA do that. And my daughter Claire and her little horse Woodford are planning on being in that class at the World Show next year. So that's our goal, is to, get those horses in classes that they are competitive in. And I think that's a great goal for a person to shoot for at the end of the year, is, go to the World Show and compete in that green pattern class. That's fantastic. That's a big class. It was a big class, and it was a competitive class. I was really surprised at the quality of horses that were in there, and the number of people that were in there was really, really good. I say that, but it wasn't like it was a bunch of horses that have been showing all year. You could tell it was a green pattern class, and they had a pattern that was not super difficult. And, they were just judging them on basic maneuvers and their willingness to do those maneuvers and the ability of that horse to listen to and accept what the rider was telling them. I thought it was a great class. But I don't feel like anybody should feel like they are not qualified to go in that class, because Kelly said it was great quality horses. I think they were good movers and all that. But they were obviously not the
Finished horsemanship.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the idea to give those horses a place to go show at a high level without having to be competitive against a been there, done that horse, because it's not like these pattern horses get finished overnight, to
For
compete
sure.
at that
And
level.
I think a lot of those horses, they have to have the points that they have to have. I can't remember. Claire read it to me the other night, but it was by January 1st. So a lot of those horses are showing all year long before they get to Oklahoma City in November. So, they're green within reason. They've been showing, and they've obviously proven to be able to do the job, at least on some occasions, or the people probably wouldn't spend the money to enter them at the World Show. But I think it's a great place to showcase our upcoming talent in the horsemanship area.
That's all the questions I had.
I think I'm good too. It was very educational. I haven't shown horsemanship in, 12 years probably. I have a big hunt seater, so that's why I selfishly asked the big horse question.
Understand. It can be done. It can be done.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the interview and all that information, taking a deep dive on the horsemanship. I know this was a requested topic from our listeners, so they'll enjoy it. And before we wrap up here, do you want to provide any information about how people can contact you or get a hold of you, your services, horses for sale, any of that type of stuff?
I would say probably the best thing is I'm on Facebook, just Kelly McDowell, and you can message me, or I don't know how else for people to get a hold of me.
Most people respond to Facebook Messenger these days, especially in the horse world. That's the easiest way to go about it. So.
Yep. I think that's probably the easiest way to find me.
All righty.
Just look for lots of horse pictures.
You're the only one though, right? All right. Everybody, please remember to like, share, subscribe, follow us share the podcast for us to help spread it. Otherwise, thank you again, Kelly. Appreciate your time and have a good rest of your evening.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, that'll be your class. Bring them in and line them up.